And good day. Thank you for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. You're listening to Truth for Our Time, where we help you live God's Word in today's world. When the issues hit home, when the headlines hit home, we help you understanding His Word. Because if He expects you to live through it, He's directed you how to do it somewhere in His Word. Now, as you know, we have been keeping you up to date on an issue happening right here in Iowa, Fairfield Community School District. We broke the news right here on this show. The superintendent kindly came on and did a discussion with me. It was civil, even though we disagreed. That school district has implemented the transgender bathrooms already, causing great consternation, concern, insecurity, anxiety, fear, physical elements of fear for many of the students. And when we asked that superintendent, you'll remember, I said, how many students do you think you're helping with this policy? Less than 10, maybe a handful. How many do you think you're causing concern and discomfort? Otherwise, probably 600, she said. Parents have come together in that district, and I'm quite pleased. I'm quite proud. The pastoral community has come together. They're having meetings. They're meeting for prayer. They're meeting for direction, and they're strategizing to see what they can do to save their children. In response to that, someone in the school district contacted, or somehow Iowa Safe Schools learned about this issue and implemented themselves. Either someone brought them in or they've put themselves in it. They went to the last school board meeting and they so much as called the parents hateful. They told the school all the reasons they must implement this policy and protect transgender students at the risk of all other students' safety and security issues. And as you know, we've followed this along. We've had instances where boys have already gone into the shower rooms because they can. It's a dare. Supposedly a young lady on a field trip demanded to be in the room with two boys because she identified as a boy. We didn't know if the parents had been told ahead of time, hers or the students. So let me just tell you what this Safe Schools has written. On Monday, June 20th, the Fairfield Community School Board directors met to discuss transgender youth. Iowa Safe Schools Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, Iowa State Education Association, and others presented information on the need to support transgender youth. Many community members had received gross misinformation from a national hate group and tried to intimidate the school board into violating state and federal law to target transgender students. The school board stood strong and voted to implement best practice guidelines for supporting transgender and cisgender students. We need to thank the school board for their work. Iowa school boards and administrators need to know that Iowans have their backs from these out-of-state hate groups. I asked one of my folks down there, who is this hate group? They had no idea. There were no other groups there but these groups. So we don't know what hate group they're calling. We don't know who they're even talking about, because this group of pastors that's meeting is an organic group, and I'm very pleased to see them on their own without some other outside force coming in. So I just wanted to let you know what's happening. This is the Safe Schools, and this is Nate Munson, who refused to testify in front of the investigative committee at the State House over the LGBTQ conference, where even pro or friendly LGBTQ teachers took their students home because it was so absolutely horrid and the information was vulgar and not appropriate for those students to hear. But this is Nate Munson inserting himself once again in the students and your parents, your role as a parent, your role as local control, community members, taxpayers, school board members. So keep Fairfield in your prayers, and we'll keep you abreast of what's happening down there as your schools are being taken over by hostile groups who will not allow even both sides of this situation to be discussed. I don't believe that there was even another group down there talking against it this particular day, other than parents. All right, we're coming into July 4th, which I've been told by my friends I need to call it Independence Day. Don't call it July 4th anymore. Call it Independence Day. It is the day we celebrate our nation's independence. And so what a perfect guest I have coming on as we come into this weekend of celebration. Congressman Bob McEwen. He is now the executive director of the Center for National Policy. You have probably heard him on this show before, or many of the conferences and seminars that he's given across the nation and here in Iowa. His resources, just a few, are Politics Easy as Pie, one of our favorites in our household. He's always humorous to listen to, but informative. What he does is cause you to laugh, and you let your shoulders down, and you don't realize you're learning while you're listening. Congressman McEwen, thank you for joining me today.
Well, the pleasure is mine, Tamara. Great to be with you.
And let me just tell my listeners, too, I am a delegate, as you know, for the National Convention, and as National Committee woman, we had to fill out a little survey there, and it had 3 of our favorite former elected officials, and you were on my list.
Well, thank you. I feel very much at home in Iowa. I always love being there and being with you, and the chance to be on your program as well.
Well, you are perfect to discuss a variety of topics we're going to discuss today as we come into our Independence Weekend. And if we can, let's try and close with something positive for our listeners to encourage them in all of this heated battle and the turmoil that's in the headlines as we face this anniversary of our signing of the Declaration of Independence. And folks, if you haven't read it, would you please take time with your family this weekend? Read the Declaration. It is not a long document. Read it. Read it. The reasons, their unhappiness with the king. Read why the reasons they decided to leave. But read those 4 paragraphs where you will find God mentioned 4 times in that declaration. Not an ecumenical display of several gods to make people happy, but the one true God that our founding fathers listened to, and the Judeo-Christian principles this country was founded upon. So, Bob McEwen, I wanted to talk about a variety of topics. We just had discussion. Clinton and Loretta Lynch met secretly on a plane in the middle of the desert. It's gotten much scrutiny. Is that protocol? Are people right to question that?
Well, I think I was probably like many people when she said that they just passed in the aisle and discussed grandchildren and things. And I would think that's exactly what one would do. Kelly Guilfoyle, however you say her last name, on Fox, she mentioned, however, that as a prosecutor, she said she would always make sure that the judge instructed the jury that now the prosecutors are not being rude to you, but if you pass in the hall or if you're in the restroom together, they will not speak with you and they will not respond to you because you are not to converse at all during the course of the trial. So there is a level at which you're not supposed to encounter one another. And you think if this is the president and the attorney general, that would be at least you were civil with one another. And that was what I first heard. Now we have learned that she arrived early. They sat there for over an hour. That before waiting for for Clinton to arrive, his plane arrives. FBI agents go around and confiscate any phones or any of the capacity that you weren't allowed to record or take photographs of the meeting. They go into the plane for a private meeting. Now, of course, if they wanted to have a meeting, they could have met any place. Could have met in her office or his office, but everyone would. All those things are logged in, so they would have to take a location where no one else would be officially there. And he goes on the plane, and the 2 of them speak secretly without staff. Now, that's a whole different ballgame than at first was, well, we just passed and talked about grandchildren. And the question would be why? How was this planned? It obviously was planned for a long time. The FBI obviously was a part of it. The FBI is the one that's supposed to be the independent organization that's investigating the corruption of Mrs. Clinton, and supposedly is going to make this unbalanced and recommendation to the Justice Department. So why are they so involved in this early aspect of it? It raises a whole series of questions that just, quite frankly, we're used to when in dealing with this administration or dealing with the Clintons. They always, she knew from day one that the things that they were going to do, where Saudi Arabia would make a request, her husband would then go speak to the Saudis, pockets anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in cash for speaking, and then the State Department would the Clinton Foundation would receive millions of dollars in contributions from the country, and then she, as Secretary of State, would meet whatever request that they made. There's a series of books on this. It's been made abundantly clear. One new one is just coming out next month. The fact is that her performance as Secretary of State, you cannot put your finger down any place on the planet and show where there has been an improvement in our relationship, but you can show where hundreds of millions of dollars flowed to the Clintons individually, personally, and to their foundation as a result of her service. And so anyone impartially would believe that she would receive an indictment from the FBI, but as we've seen with this presidential meeting with the Attorney General who oversees the FBI, I'm not optimistic that would take place. And it's unfortunate for all the people who look to America as the standard for right and wrong in the world, and that we expect our leaders to behave with integrity. It just it's no wonder that 2 out of 3 people believe that she's corrupt.
I think your phrase there is extremely telling. Not one improvement with a country around the globe during her tenure as in the State Department, but millions of dollars flowed to the Clinton foundations during that time.
Yep, and so it's I think it's partly given rise to the idea of having someone who's not been in Washington as the Republican nominee, and people say, well, he doesn't understand government that well. But if you're hiring a CEO and a large chemical company hires the head of a large beverage company or a large auto company, you're hiring a CEO to bring organization into the chaos. They don't need to be an expert on steel making. They need to be an expert on how to run a business. And I think that there's a desire to have someone who is not interested in making money for himself, but interested in restoring our military, making an educational system we can be proud of again, and then just the basics. Our highways and bridges are falling apart. Our airports, as no one has had the backbone to say other than Donald Trump, has mentioned that our airports in New York particularly have just become third world. I mean, they're just filthy. And I will say in that context, I've been in 11 countries in the last 30 days. And the airports elsewhere, even in these poor countries of Eastern and Central Europe, that the improvements they've made compared to where we are, the most gorgeous airport in the world is in Abu Dhabi, where they spent $4 billion on that airport, $4 billion, and yet in the first 10 days that Barack Obama was president, they passed nearly $1 trillion, $879 billion for, quote, shovel-ready jobs. In other words, they were supposed to do the bridges and the airports and the highways, and neither you nor I can find a dime that went to anything. And then, of course, a couple of years later, he laughed about the fact, well, they weren't as shovel-ready as we thought. All that money disappeared down a hole. Just from that bill alone, you could have put one of those gorgeous $4 billion airports in every city in America over 75,000. But so I think people are looking for someone who can take this great country and go back to doing what we're supposed to do, rather than involving themselves in all of these social experiments in the defense and in schools and in children, and all the fact that they obviously have their eyes off of what government is supposed to do and on what their desires are in the way of social engineering.
Absolutely. We have just a minute before we go to break. One more question on the security issue, which you have a great knowledge of. And, well, we may come back to that as well when we come back from break, because I want to hear from you on Istanbul. But we're now hearing a headline, and I don't know truthandaction.org. I can't speak to this validity of this organization or this website. 72 officials on the watch list are in the Department of Homeland Security. Is there truth to that?
Well, there is, and no one knows how you get on the watch list. And so with the Democrats sitting on the floor of the House chanting that anybody on the watch list should not be allowed to own a gun, no one knows how you get on it, and it's obviously extremely hard to get off of it, because 72 government employees of the Department of Homeland Security, the ones who are supposed to maintain the list and do maintain the list, are on the list. And so yesterday, when when the head of DHS was before the committee with Senator Cruz, and he asked about this. Jay Johnson, the president's head of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, was just arrogant and dismissive and just smart alecky about this very severe question, and could not give us an explanation as to how people get on the list or how they would get off. And now there are those that want to use that as the vehicle to disarm America.
Right. We've got to go to a break right now. You're listening to Tamara Scott with Truth for Our Time on 99.3 FM and Webcast One Live. Stay tuned. We have more after this.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, I'm J. Michael McCoy, and about 20 years ago, I went to a used car salesman by the name of John Hewitt. He had a little shop over there on North 2nd Avenue called John's Auto Sales, and I bought a car. I found that experience to be one that I had never had before from a used car salesman. He was honest, he was dependable, he had integrity, and he did what he said he was going to do. Well, over the years, between my kids and grandkids, I purchased 7 vehicles from John's Auto Sales. And last month, I asked him to be a sponsor. I can tell you about their huge selection. I can tell you about their years of experience. I can tell you about their honest integrity. But all I really need to tell you is that I bought 7 cars, and you can trust them. John's Auto Sales, 5435 2nd Avenue, Des Moines.
You need a good ride when you hit the trail. Trust the man with the cars, and he goes by the name of Big John. Big John. Big John.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
And thanks for staying tuned. I am Tamara Scott. You're listening to Truth for Our Time as we help you live God's Word in today's world. Helping you when the headlines hit home, my guest today is Congressman Bob McEwen, MC, capital EWEN, BobMcEwen.com. He's also the executive director for Center for National Policy. And Congressman, forgive me, I just jumped right into our discussion, and I really didn't give you a chance to give our listeners any idea of what the Center for National Policy is or what it does.
Well, it's a counterbalance to the Council on Foreign Relations. Back in the 1960s and 70s, one of the major think tanks for liberalism was the Council on Foreign Relations. And when Ronald Reagan chose George Bush as his running mate, the conservatives, after he was sprung on them at the convention, a week or two later, people began to say, wait, this is the fellow that we opposed during the primary, and now he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, which is a subset of that. And George Bush's response was, in 1980, he said that, well, the conservatives don't have anything like that, and that's why I was a member. So in 1981, with the beginning of the Reagan administration, a group of conservatives, businessmen, primarily from Texas, and then a series of conservative organizations like Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum, the National Rifle Association, the Heritage Foundation, and others, they formed the Council for National Policy, which is a conservative consortium. And what I love about it is that we don't compete with anyone else. We meet 3 times a year. And all of the leading conservatives, the New York Times says there's no one place where more conservatives gather, and we cross-pollinate, support one another, but we don't raise money, so therefore we're not a competitor to anyone. It's a dues membership makeup. And so as a result, all of the folks that care for our values in national defense, in economics, and in traditional family values are all centered there, and we meet 3 times a year. But on the presidential year, we always meet in the city of the host city of the Republican convention, which will be in Cleveland in 2 weeks.
So I will look forward to seeing you and hopefully your lovely and beautiful wife, Liz, at the RNC convention. And I want to get to the activities that we see and hear may be happening there as far as the Dump Trump movement. But first, I want to finish on this line of security around the world. Istanbul. Let me just ask you first. We hear this meeting yesterday, and they're talking about Homeland Security, tightening TSA. They want 100,000 employees for TSA, and I'm already on record as saying this reminds me of the 2000 ploy to put 100,000 teachers in the classroom. Didn't help us with class size, and because unless you had classrooms being built, you didn't have classrooms to put these teachers in to spread out the students. It was nothing more than in my opinion, a grasp at putting 100,000 people on a union during an election year. Now we go into the TSA. We hear they need 100,000 employees for TSA. I don't think that's the issue. When I go through the airport, there are several. I have photos of them standing around. I don't think that's the issue. And when I look back at recent accounts, yes, Istanbul is in the airport. I get that. But San Bernardino, Brussels, Orlando, Israel, the young lady, 13-year-old who stabbed in her own bed, terrorist attack. It's not necessarily the TSA that's going to stop the next terrorist attack.
Yes, when the tub is overflowing, and we have the folks that were sitting on the floor of the Congress the other day. Well, we need a new mop, or we need more towels, or no. You need to go over and shut off the water, and we know where it's coming from. It is radical Islamists. I just was reading moments ago. Kevin Sorbo, who played Hercules on television, he says he's of Norwegian extraction. He said if Norwegians were strapping bombs on themselves and going around blowing people up, we would begin to look for Norwegians. It seems to be that would be the wise thing to do. And the real problem and the frustration I think the nation feels is this political correctness, that when you know who's doing it, when you know where it's coming from, and then for Hillary Clinton to say we need to bring hundreds of millions more, not only people bring them, we go pick them up, pay for their transportation, give them homes and living standards above anything they could ever dream about in the Middle East. Just to give you, if you take the 26 Muslim countries in the Middle East, this is greater than the population of the United States and Europe combined. When you take those 26 countries and include oil production, but they don't make a single hairdryer or automobile or TV set or anything else, the gross domestic product of that area is half the size of the state of California. So you have these hundreds of millions of people that are living in conditions because of Sharia law and the other contempt for human rights and for free enterprise. You bring them by the hundreds of thousands to America. You sprinkle them throughout the nation over and over. The people in America are beginning to ask, why are we doing this? When there are people who want to be Americans, who value our value system, why don't we allow them to come? And yet Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and they will not even discuss. If you say it is unwise to bring someone who doesn't want to be an American, doesn't want to speak English, does not want to dress as an American, does not want to salute our flag or defend our country, we shouldn't bring those people. Then the only alternative that they have is that they then call you a racist. And let me just point out that some time ago, this is an standard of argument that's been around for a long time, because Socrates said that when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. And so when you want to ask that school board, at Fairfield School Board, and I would like to get back to that in a minute, when you ask them, why will you permit young boys to go into the locker rooms of these girls, and then rather than answer that question, they then begin to call you names. Mm-hmm. They have conceded that the debate was lost. Therefore, slander becomes the tool of the loser, and which has been the case now in our national security and in most of what the Clinton Obama administration is doing at this present time. That's why we need to change so desperately.
We absolutely do. And I see hope on the horizon. I see recovery possible if Americans will allow it. And I want to come to that shortly. So stay tuned, folks. We'll get to that discussion. We're going to talk, as born-again believers, about Trump versus the Never Trump movement. But I do want to talk on this Istanbul. I know you travel the world. I know you have a great understanding of foreign policy, of diplomacy, of relations in other countries. Take us through what your thoughts are on the latest terrorist attack. I should say massive terrorist attack, because I'm sure there have been other smaller ones since in Istanbul.
Well, interesting. We have been in that airport for over 10 hours in the last month on 4 different occasions. So it's naturally unfortunate, but the ISIS, which is the Islamic State, which of course our president calls is not Islamic, but everyone else recognizes the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria have established what is called a caliphate, that is, rule by Sharia law and overruns the boundaries, which is what it was prior to World War I. And in 1923, when these countries had been formed and the lines had been drawn, and the head of Turkey had outlawed the fez and outlawed the veil and said you had to wear Western dress and changed the alphabet from the Cyrillic to the Western, and they became frustrated that they were not going to go back to the control that is completely Muslim. They formed the Muslim Brotherhood down in Cairo, and they've fought for quite some time in order to overthrow these nations and establish the caliphate again. Those nations have always fought against it. It wasn't until the United States of America under Barack Obama came back to Cairo in 2009, expressed support for the Muslim Brotherhood, supported their efforts to overthrow the leadership in Tunisia, then the overthrow of our friends in Egypt, and then, of course, when they tried to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, which is right between those two countries, when they began to fail, that's when Hillary Clinton went in and bombed on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood. So those folks are trying to establish a caliphate, that is, that they don't recognize individual boundaries between countries, but it is all under Islamic rule. And one of the major players to prevent that, of course, is Turkey. And so they want to overthrow the government of Turkey and reestablish the caliphate that was in Istanbul, which was in Constantinople prior to World War I. So that's it's abundantly clear. Barack Obama understands it better than anyone. As you know, he is a supporter of the Islamic effort. When he went to Iraq, he mentioned that he brings expressions of support from the Islamic community in America, and that they were a major part in the creation of America. He mentioned that the first nation to recognize the United States was an Islamic country. He didn't point out that was because the Barbary pirates, the Islamic terrorists in the Mediterranean, when the United States was no longer under the protection of the British, they said, "You're a sovereign country," and attacked America and stole its ships and killed its sailors. So that was the first recognition that he referred to, but he left that part out when he was discussing it. He understands this fight very, very well. His Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, understands it. They understand what this battle is about. They want to reestablish the caliphate, not just for that region, but for the whole world. And that's the battle that we face. And we'll have to recognize it sometime. Many people already have, but unless we address it every day that goes by, it's harder and harder.
This is why we like to have you on with your wide knowledge, your wide variety of topics. Economics is one of your strengths. We have, maybe 3 or 4 minutes before our next break. I don't know if that's enough time or not. Brexit. We've heard so much about it. And as we'll get to after this break, talking about Trump, he was one of the few who called for the leaving of the European Union by the UK. And we now are seeing... tell us, is it going to be as horrible as some are saying? What's going to happen?
No, when the vote was taken last week, and then all the collapse of the stock markets and all the rest, I said to Liz, to my wife, I said, this will all be gone by Wednesday of next week. And so she showed me the headlines yesterday for Thursday stock market, and it is higher than it was in the FTSE in London, also in the Orient as well as the United States, all the stock markets are higher than they were last Wednesday, which was the day before the impact had taken place. So what happened was that there are some companies that had special privileges that might lose them eventually over time, and they didn't deserve to have them in the first place, and so money began to move. But the idea that there's a collapse, let me just say that if you want to plant a garden, you can have a garden like you want to be successful. But if your neighbors come around and say, no, you can only plant on Mondays and Tuesdays, and you have to use this kind of shovel, and you have to pay for this kind of fence, and you can't do it unless there's this kind of and all these restrictions, it becomes harder. With each new regulation, it becomes harder and harder and harder for you to have your garden. So the more government you have, the more regulations you have, and the more taxes that steal away the profits, the greater the poverty. And when the European Union went together in order to make it easier to interact between one another, they wanted to create a European community, which they had up until 27 years ago. And at that point, they began to move to governance as well, where they would also synchronize their laws. Well, now you have people sitting in Brussels making a regulation telling you the size of the glass that you can use, the amount of curvature and the bananas that you can sell in your grocery store, the size of the light bulb, whether or not you can have. And when you elect your parliament in London, they don't have any say because those decisions are being made over in Brussels. When we come back, I'll mention how that Britain stayed away from that for a long time. They got sugared into it very narrowly, and they've just waited until this moment to get out. But the truth of the matter is, in my judgment, this is just the beginning, that you're going to see the desire for more independence and freedom come from the French and then the Spanish, and then this whole thing's going to unravel, and that will be good for everyone. So
we have just maybe 35 seconds before we go to break. I'm talking with Congressman Bob McEwen. You can find him at bobmcewen.com, BOBMCEWEN. He's executive director for the Center for National Policy, and you're hearing just a touch, just the tip of the knowledge that this man has and has gained from his experience globally, as well as from serving in our congressional chambers here in the U.S. We'll be talking with him when we come back. We're going to get into this idea of Trump versus never Trump from a born-again believing standpoint. What is best for our country? So stay tuned with us. I am Tamara Scott. You're listening to Truth for Our Time, webcast1live.com studios, and 99.3 FM, Central Iowa's Voice of Truth.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
And thanks for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. If you're one of the 23,991 viewers who are joining us live right now, we thank you for joining in. Congressman Bob McEwen, Executive Director of the Center for National Policy, I give you full credit for that, sir.
It's great to be with you always.
23,991 people online with us right now watching our discussion. And I will tell you, you will not get better counsel than what you will get with Bob McEwen, the wisdom that is there. And so, Bob, you were going to touch, you wanted something more on the Brexit, and perhaps you already were able to get to that before the commercial break, but a few more countries you think are going to leave. I think so as well. They'll be leaving the European Union, and they'll be better for it.
Well, the British people didn't want to join in the first place, and Edward Heath is just like when we make a real between the conservatives and the liberals. Oftentimes, is the conservatives join with the liberals, and Edward Heath was the conservative leader of the Parliament, and he made a deal with the Labour. And at the very end of his administration, he voted to join the European Union. He did it only halfway. They wouldn't do away with the British pound, so they kept their currency, which was vital and critical and important. They never went to the euro. But then most of the Tories, most of the conservatives wanted out all along. And immediately after he did that, shortly thereafter, he was overthrown as leader of the Conservative Party and was replaced with Margaret Thatcher. And Margaret Thatcher then a year or two later was elected the prime minister, but in all of the chaos of the destruction of the country that they were in the middle of, she was not able to extract herself from the EU, but nevertheless there's always been a strong desire to do it. So such that in the manifesto, which is the party platform for the Conservatives, they forced David Cameron to make a promise that at least if he wasn't going to allow them to vote to remove from the European Union, that he would let the people vote. And so part of the campaign was that they would have a referendum and let the people of Britain vote whether they want to be a part of this European Union, which has become increasingly totalitarian, just demanding. And of course, it wouldn't allow them to restrict the flow of people that once they got into the EU through immigration, then they could all end up in London or the wealthy areas of Birmingham or elsewhere. So, and when you talk to your parliamentarian, when you talk to the prime minister, there's nothing I can do about it. Nothing. That's all EU. So the British people voted. They voted to extract themselves. It won't happen for a minimum of 2 years. So all of this chaos and breastfeeding and collapsing and carrying on, it's just the fact that once somebody did it, and everybody, it's like the emperor has no clothes. People said, well, we shouldn't be there either. And they know that it's going to, that whole layer of government that has been a source of socialism and poverty for Europe for the last decade is about to be broken. And you watch what happens to a lot of businesses. Businesses are going to move to Britain and get out from under that restriction. It's going to be the best thing ever happened to the United Kingdom, in my judgment.
Why did David Cameron step down?
Well, he put everything on the line. He wanted to stay in. As you know, he is strongly in favor of gay marriage and strongly in favor of the European Union. Two things that really are not the positions of the Conservative Party. And so when he campaigned with all the opposition, they traveled in a block of the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party, and they would all go and they hold these rallies. And the Prime Minister, the leading conservative, the heir to Margaret Thatcher, would stand there with all these other socialists and say that Britain should vote to stay in Europe because Britain was no different than Denmark, and it needed to just be a part of the big mix there. When he was defeated in the electorate, then the conservatives in the party said, I think you're more comfortable on the other side of the aisle than you are here, and he knew that. And so within 6 hours, he said that as they now begin to negotiate their independence, they need to have someone who believes in that path, and therefore he would step down.
So a mutual friend of ours, Gary Miller, has a ministry called Talk Less, Pray More, and he wrote a quick little thought on this process, and he just said, if you remember, the polls all said that they were going to stay in. The narrative was that it was best for them to stay in, that everyone should stay in. There was a shame campaign for those who didn't want to stay in, and yet when people went to the poll, when they went to the election box in the privacy of that little curtained area, they voted their hearts, and they voted for independence, local control, and the ability to regulate or govern themselves. And Gary's point was, be watching for that in America. Bob, as we move to American politics and what's happening right now, I think he has a pretty good point, and you and I are going to start talking right now about Donald Trump. And I made the comment that we talk about it as born-again believers because we are, but that, to me, as our founding fathers knew, born-again believers were what made the best citizens.
Yes, and there has to be a standard of right and wrong, and that's the frustration that we see currently. That when people, I was just with a fellow that did YouTube, in which he was asked these college students that came out individually, asked them that he would ask a girl, if I feel like being a girl, can I be a woman? And she would say yes, and the guy would say they all agreed that he could be a woman. And I repeat, these are in serial; they're not together, and they all gave the same answer. So, well, suppose that I feel that I'm Asian, I'm an Asian female. Is there any reason you have a right to tell me I'm not an Asian female? And they eventually agreed that yes, he could be an Asian female. And so then he's 5'9", and he said, well, what if I'm 6'5"? And a couple of the guys started to wobble at that, but they all generally conceded that this 5'9" white male could be a 6'5" Asian female.
Sure.
And you couldn't help but think about the Emperor Has No Clothes, the Hans Christian Andersen story about the Emperor walking down in his royal underwear, and the little boy said he doesn't have any clothes on because they said that the smart people will see the clothes. And so nobody admitted that they couldn't see his royal outfit. But the little boy said, no, he didn't have anything on. And the scripture says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And we're now literally seeing capable, able-bodied, smart 20-year-old Americans standing there looking you square in the eye and saying this 5'9" white male is a 6'5" Asian female. And you recognize that unless there's some sort of the Bible says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When there's no respect for God, then there's no wisdom, and you just do these foolish things. That's why our founders had a starting point that we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created, endowed by their Creator. That's going to be the starting point, that we believe is Creator. That's where our rights come from, life and liberty. When you abandon that and we're above and beyond that, then you get in trouble, because that is truth. Let me just read when the Harvard was formed. Of course, it had as its theme truth through Christ. And some years ago, they did away with El Cristo, and they just had the theme, which was Veritas, and which is Latin for truth. So we're going to do away with the Christ. We're just going to have truth. Well, if you don't have the starting point, then what is truth? Well, the ultimate now comes recently when the new president of Harvard was sworn in. She read, let me just read a sentence from her speech, in which she says, in Veritas, which is Latin for truth, in Harvard's shield, which is on the seal of Harvard, it's on the ties and on the cufflinks and everything. It says, The Veritas in Harvard Shield was originally intended to invoke the absolutes of divine revelation, the unassailable verities of Puritan religion. In other words, that was going to be a foundation. We understand it quite differently now, she said. Truth is an aspiration, not a possession.
Wow.
Yet in this, and get this, and here's what happens. In this, we challenge and threaten those who would embrace unquestioned certainties. In other words, all of us, and let me just talk about truth. I can say a room is 8 feet wide, and the person can say it's 5, 6, 10, or 12. But when you measure it, measurement is not only truth, but it reveals error. And so until you've measured it, we can all agree that we think we know what's right. But once you measure, truth reveals error. So everyone who thought it was 12 and 15 and 7 and 9, they all together hate truth. They want to prevent the presentation of truth. Christ is truth. That's why you can pray in the name of eagle feathers and Mother Earth and all that, and nobody will complain. But it's only, as she said, when you have the truth in this, we challenge and
We've got to go. We'll be right back. We've got to go. We'll be right back after that message.
I'm sorry. Bye-bye.
No. Stay
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah!
If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, I'm J. Michael McCoy, and about 20 years ago, I went to a used car salesman by the name of John Hewitt. He had a little shop over there on North 2nd Avenue called John's Auto Sales, and I bought a car. I found that experience to be one that I'd never had before from a used car salesman. He was honest, he was dependable, he had integrity, and he did what he said he was going to do. Well, over the years, between my kids and grandkids, I purchased 7 vehicles from John's Auto Sales. And last month, I asked him to be a sponsor. I can tell you about their huge selection. I can tell you about their years of experience. I can tell you about their honest integrity. But all I really need to tell you is that I bought 7 cars, and you can trust them. John's Auto Sales, 5435 2nd Avenue, Des Moines.
You need a good ride when you hit the trail. Trust the man with the cars, and he goes by the name of Big John. Big John. Big John.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
And I am Tamara Scott. Thank you for staying tuned with us. If you're like me, you were hanging on every word, and I didn't want to cut him off. So we'll come right back and allow Bob to finish that sentence. But I also need to remind you, our guest next week is going to be Pastor El Massif. Massif, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Forgive me. My family will tell you I can't pronounce dog leash right. I just get twisted up in my words sometimes, but Pastor L. Massif will be our guest. He's with persecutedchristians.org or for the loveofmuslims.org, and he'll be talking about his Pakistani background and how he was persecuted. His village was burned, and he is now living for Christ and talking about how we might witness to those who may not know the Lord but come from a Islamic background. Bob McEwen, please take us right back where we left off. We're hanging on your words.
Well, it's just about truth, that those in error will always attack truth. And so why you don't have conservative, Bible-believing farmers get in their truck and drive to a rally to scream and yell at Barack Obama or Hillary or at Bernie Sanders. And yet when a conservative speaks at a college campus or anywhere, they come out and they shout them down. Now, why is that? It's because truth overcomes error.
Right.
And the only way error to survive, it has to prevent the presentation of truth. So if you have one conservative professor on the college campus, the truth will overcome. And just a quick, for example, Fox News has every liberal that there is, but they also have a conservative periodically. And when they do, the truth overcomes. So the president constantly attacks Fox News. Now, they have PBS and ABC and NBC and CBS. Why do they care? Because truth overcomes error. That's why, as the president of Harvard said, we threaten those who would embrace unquestioned certainties. If you believe the Bible is the Word of God, if you believe basics, we will threaten you, because we believe in choice as long as we're in error. But once you stand for righteousness, then choice is out the window. But we want to talk about leadership for our country.
We do. But you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And perhaps when we close and talk about 4th of July, we can talk about this, because our founding fathers, that's why the First Amendment, they knew if Christianity were allowed to be spoken, truth would win, which is exactly why so many others try to stop and silence Christianity above all other religions. You don't see this angst against Buddhism. You don't see it against Hinduism or any of the other religions. It's always about Christianity, because the truth in the name of Jesus Christ, when you speak Jesus Christ in the airwaves, in the world, in the atmosphere, there is a difference that takes place. Even the demons hear him and tremble. That's what the Word of God tells us. All right, never Trump or ever Trump. You will be at the RNC. I will be at the RNC. My thoughts are known on this. I did an interview, folks. If you want to go to Truth for Our Time Facebook page, the link is on there, with another radio station, and only 30 minutes long. I didn't get all my thoughts in on it yet, but Bob, I want to hear yours.
Well, let me tell you, I am very serious about this. I know some people want to joke about it and smile, and, well, I can't. But we are at a precipice. The Supreme Court defines what America is. We have 4 members of the Supreme Court, 2 appointed by Clinton, 2 appointed by Obama. Those 4 vote in lockstep, solid lockstep every time. And on the Mojave Desert fight, in which we had a cross out in the middle of the desert that was put there by World War I veterans, and people said the mere picture of the cross should not be allowed, and it went to the Supreme Court. Those 4 said that the Constitution of the United States says that you cannot have a religious symbol on any public property any place in America. Now, that means one more vote like that, one more Clinton appointee, one more Obama appointee, and you will have to take sandblasters to every courthouse in America, to every national cemetery in America. You will revolutionize our country, number one. Number 2, the protection to protect guns. When Lenin took over, when Hitler takes over, when Mussolini takes over, when any dictator, the first thing he does is confiscate guns. Those 4 people voted unanimously and said that the Constitution does not permit individuals. The Second Amendment to the Constitution, which our founders put on the very first day that they met, the Second Amendment does not protect individuals from owning guns. Only the militia, only the government. Now, one more vote, and anybody. So you can't tell me that if you believe in any of these things that I can vote for Hillary. Hillary will undo everything that we stand for. Now the question is, but Donald Trump can't quote John 3:16. I understand that, but here's what I do know. I went into the doctor a few weeks ago to get new glasses. And he didn't say, Bob, are your eyes as good as they were when you were 16? Are they as good as you are when you're 19? He said simply this: can you see better with 1 or 2? Better with 1 or 2? Now, that is our choice. And this, it's prideful arrogance to say, well, I'm above all of this. I don't have to vote for either one. I can write some name. I can write the name of our pastor. This is too serious for that. This nation is the lighthouse for the gospel. 85 cents out of every dollar that goes for global evangelism comes from this country. We met in a parliamentary gathering of Bible believers in the Balkans just 2 weeks ago, and they pleaded with us that we have to elect a president that understands what America stands for. People are being beheaded because you and I failed in our responsibility to elect the proper president 3.5 years ago. I believe we went over the skids and we are crashing down a hill. This is our last chance to pull on the steering wheel and hopefully miss the crash at the bottom. And if we don't get this one, I fear that once they've got their appointments to the Supreme Court, the America that we know will not come again. And I repeat, this is what so many politicians understand about Christians, that they will always have an Awana meeting to go to or some excuse as to why, when you need them, that they're not there. And I just pray that we don't do that this time. We have to make sure that a person who actually believes in America, Barack Obama wants to, Donald Trump wants to make America strong again. Donald Trump wants to restore our military. Donald Trump wants to defend what's happening to Christians around the world. Donald Trump has more backbone than any bunch of these liberals have combined. And it's our responsibility to help guide him in the right direction. And if we don't, I fear what might happen.
I totally agree. And for those of you who are wavering, I would love to talk to you more about this. We're going out of time. I'm just going to say this. Winston Churchill, belligerent, ill-behaved, not well-liked, bold. And because of him, World War II turned out differently for many of us. Trump may not be your kind of guy that you want to invite for tea, but he's the kind of guy you want when you're fighting for your liberty. We're headed out to independence. Read that Declaration of Independence. Read it with your family. You've been encouraged. Now never be complacent. Thank you so much, Bob McEwen, for joining us today.
Thank you, Tamara.
Was I too early?